Joseph Gower is a full-time professor here of religious studies, recently stepped down from being chair. He is a graduate of Notre Dame University with his doctorate degree, and he served on the faculty of St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia for 17 years. He's past provost of Mercyhurst University for 6 years and a past provost of Georgian University. He also served as president of Loras College in Idaho. He has a wife of 30 years and has 4 beautiful children who are all girls teaching in their own way across the world. He's not only a professor, he's a mentor, a friendly face on campus since day one, and I'm blessed to call him my friend. He is dedicated, hardworking, and an amazing man. So give it up for Dr. Joseph Gower.
And so I'm delighted that Agape Latte is taking off. It's having a big impact on this campus. There's some enthusiasm, and I think it's so beneficial. It's going to have a long life. And I look forward to attending other situations with it. The talk that I'm going to give tonight is considered called The Possibilities of Faith, Rediscovering Mercy, but I added 3 words, which is kind of the key of what I'm going to be talking about. Rediscovering mercy by encountering others. Encountering others. And so I'm going to talk about how my faith journey and my discovery of God, or God discovering me, we're not sure how that goes, came from other people. And that's not surprising to Christianity, because we talk about concern for others and neighbors, and that if you had to choose loving God or loving your neighbor, go with your neighbor, and then you will find God. So I'll talk around that a little bit. I would say my experience with faith and spirituality can be termed incarnational spirituality. By that I mean it's embodied in people, in myself, and so it's very tangible, very visible. It is in the world and in the people I met, especially those encounters that result in true dialogue, real engagement, and a sense of interpersonal encounter. Interpersonal encounter. So we're going to meet others and we're going to be impacted by them. We hope we have an impact on them. In fact, my faith can be considered itself as a journey. It is a lifelong journey with others, and with the hope that those others may be my companions. The big question is how to connect with others in ways that allow us to affirm each other as valuable persons, perhaps even discovering within them a sense of sacredness. Most of my interactions have been fine and good, but sometimes they are shallow and superficial, and sometimes they are multi-layered. With an incarnational spirituality, I am aiming at depth, genuine, authentic relationships, even if they are only temporarily. This aim motivates faith on a quest that has been formed and informed by my participation in the Christian community and tradition. I was born a Catholic. I'm traditioned. I'm a traditioned person. I'm an institutionalized person. I've been in institutions all my life. I started school at age 5. Guess where I am? Unstopped. You're welcome to do this. You go to school and you never get out. And I'm pleased with that, however. So it's important that you see that. So when I'm talking about this quest and this search, I'm up front telling you it's pretty much a Catholic situation. I have a family that was Catholic, and they passed on to me their sense of the tradition. They were probably more good at it than I am, but through practice and learning, we all mature, and we go through stages of faith development. In my college years, I was drawn to philosophical and theological questions. I was a philosophy major. It's a rare thing, but a good thing, and so that's important to recognize. I was also interested in literature. I was into at that time a theater of the absurd, Albert Camus, stuff like that. I was also an activist. I wanted social change, and I put some time in working that out. Got involved in politics. The people I was supporting didn't win, but But that helped form me too. You have to recognize. And you may have had that experience. I don't know. Recently, I think. No comment there. I was deliberately entering at that time into an intellectual quest. I was looking for wisdom sufficient to guide my life, adequate to offer meaning, and to satisfy the drive for a good and rewarding life. I was engaged with works of justice, civil rights, peace, equality, and social reform. But as I review my faith story, I know that I never had a dramatic faith moment. I never fall off a horse. Lightning didn't strike me. Very boring faith story. But I didn't have an instantaneous conversion experience. I was more developmental, driven by learning and a change for agenda. I hope for a better world and committed to building it. When I recall the peak moments of my life, I remember I was very inspired by the arts, by music, by drama, by literature. When I was 19, I was in the Cathedral of Chartres in France, and I was overwhelmed by that architecture, the sense of beauty, extraordinary. And the people I was with said that I was somewhere else, that something had overcome me, this experience of beauty. And when I remember it, I think I was floating in the air. I don't think I really was. It's like walking on water, but I was not floating in the air, but something experience transformed me, changed me, impacted me. And likewise with music. I remember the first time I attended Verdi's Nabucco, this beautiful opera, in which, particularly with the chorus of the Hebrew slaves, a beautiful rendition there. Now, opera is interesting because the word opera means everything. It's all there. You have music, yes, you have the orchestra, you have voices, you have theater, you have stagecraft, you have everything. That's why it's opera. And you can see, if you've had experience with opera, how powerful that is. And so those are the things I could talk about, moments of peak experiences. Activity, social justice, literature, architecture, music. And even recently I was in New York to see an extraordinary play. Have you heard about it, The Humans? It won a Tony for the best new drama. And it's about a family, parents, a grandmother who is senile. She doesn't say anything. She moans and groans, but she doesn't have any speech in the play, but has an important role. And two daughters who has a live-in boyfriend. And they're having a Thanksgiving dinner in Chinatown. And it's one of the funniest plays I've ever seen, but one of the tragic ones. Because each one has a problem. Each one brings a situation. And it's tragic, but what saves them is that they love and support each other. And it ends with the family. It began with the family. They're changed by each other, but they are bound to each other. And if you ever get a chance to see it, certainly do. The other, I'm waiting to see a novel I read about 20 years ago called Silence, which has been now made into film. And it's not doing well because it's too good. It's about a great story about Jesuit missionaries in Japan who are ultimately going to be martyred and who are living with this Christian community that is outlawed in Japan, who are being suffered and tortured. And it's an extraordinary story of faith and endurance and commitment and loyalty. So if you get a chance to see it, Silence. In fact, I know Evelyn's hoping that it comes to Brick and she'll get tickets for the entire campus. That's what yeah, we can do that. I mean, since it's not coming to Brick, I've been after them. Because the problem is it's too long, it's too good, and a spiritual-based religious movie, despite the great acting, in a great direction. Anyway, these are the things that kind of would move me. And now, so then how did I get to be religious if I am religious? Wonderful things have taken place in meeting people. I had some recent experiences. 2 years ago, my brother died. That was a big impact on me. We were close. He was a lot older than I am. I'm the youngest of the family. And going through that moment of dying and funeral was an important event. Then just in November, daughter Sarah had her first child, which is our first grandchild. His name is Abram. Some of you knew him as his fetal name, Sprout. And that shows how much they were attached to this new life. They named the child as soon as the pregnancy happened, and Sprout, Abram, formerly known as Sprout, is with us and having fun. And that's a thrilling experience as well. Likewise, liturgical events, pilgrimages, other things like that have been very important and enlivening. And so I treasure all of these experiences. And what I want to show is that where is it that I find faith and what is the spiritual path? And it's going to sound theological, but I'm saying it's very interpersonal. It's going to do with relationships. Remember, we teach the course in ethics. Ethics is only about relationships with people and society. And so I think faith is like that too. It's only about relationships. But there's a special mysterious member of that relationship called God. And so when we encounter people, we get insights. I'm going to give you a method of how to do that, how to engage in encounter, and learn from that. Right now I'm thinking of Herman Melville. I'm thinking of Moby Dick. Many years ago, when probably your age, I read Moby Dick, and there's one passage, there's just one line that hasn't left me. It's the passage where Captain Ahab, who is in fierce pursuit of the Moby Dick, the white whale, and he's manic about it. He's totally into it. Nothing else gets in his way. But he's in a conversation with Starbuck, the first mate. Now, I should say something about that. You heard of this name, Starbuck? Have you heard of it? Yeah? You been there? What do you know about Starbuck? Well, he's the first mate in Moby Dick. And the founders of this company known as Starbucks, one was a writer and the other was an English major. And did you ever wonder how this name came about? And particularly the image on the cups, yeah? Some siren of the sea, some woman. Well, Ahab and Starbuck are in conversation, and what Starbuck realizes is that Ahab has forgotten about his wife and child back in Nantucket. They're up where we call today Taiwan. They call it Formosa, and Ahab momentarily looks at Starbuck and gazes in his eye, and he brings up the memory of his wife and his child. And Ahab casts his gaze, and he says to Starbuck, "Let me look into a human eye. It is better than to gaze into sea or sky, better than to gaze upon God." Now let me slow that down. Let me look into a human eye. It is better than to gaze into sea or sky, better than to gaze upon God. And that's the clue to the spirituality I'm saying. It's that it's encountering other human beings that we will, for me, find the path of faith, the spirituality that leads to God. But it's in the human encounter. So I can't say I've had a dramatic encounter with God, and maybe you have. My view is that God is not an interventionist, that He doesn't break in the way some people think. So it's always indirect, almost non-thematic that we're going to encounter the experience of God. But this question on the eyes, to look into human eye, Melville also wrote somewhere that the eyes are the gateway to the soul. Do you look in eyes? Have you ever looked in somebody's eyes? Yeah. What happened? I see. They stared back. They blinked. Yeah. This quote from Moby Dick grasps what incarnational faith means to me. We're talking about people. What I'm pointing out is the place where I find God is in human relationships. Now, this is a very simple statement I'm making here. This is not profound, but I think maybe we share the same moment. that isn't it other people that we find what we see as God. This is not unique, but to me it's a transforming revelation to say that to look into a human eye is better than to gaze upon God. God is present in interpersonal encounters, but indirectly, non-thematically, somewhat hidden. But I realize that God is the holy mystery who is not remote, but lives within us, around us, with us, guiding our spiritual journey. It is our very human nature to have a positive orientation to God. We seek God. We hunger for God. Our nature is open to the presence of God, who is disclosed in our experience and in history. Indeed, the one we call God is the source and goal of all human activities. God is the gracious living one who sustains and guides us, always present in the human history. So my faith perspective allows me to find God in other people. My point is that we are embodied spirits who have a basic orientation and a dynamic openness to God. Our nature, our human spirit, refers to a way of being that is directed beyond ourselves. Directed beyond ourselves. So to be human is to have a force drawing us beyond ourselves. In the language of theology, we call that to transcend, to go beyond our limits, to go beyond what we are. There's more to coming. I tell my students that, unfortunately, in my classes, I have no human beings. Not one. And they say, what is going on here? And they're not a human being. They are human becomings. They are in the process of developing. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to change. They can reform. They can develop. But this becoming is what I mean by transcendence. How do you go beyond yourself? Imagine if you were a human being, you're finished. It's all done. You're made. You're stamped. But if you see yourself in the process of a dynamic development, then you have an open future. You could change, you could develop. You could also decline, because part of the dynamic could go backwards. But it's my suggestion that if we are on a spiritual quest, there's strong likelihood that we will develop, that we will change, that we will seek God. Indeed, I'd say human nature is structured, programmed for God. This is what we're made from. And so this is true, by the way, I said I'm a Catholic, but I think this is true of all human beings and of other religions as well. So I'm not saying this is specifically closed to Christians. It's open to all people that I know. It's open to atheists. This freedom that we have to seek for a better life, to cast out our anxiety and to freeze us, to give up our insecurities, our anguish, this freedom makes love possible. It provides a sacramental vision, a way of seeing by which I see God in, with, and under everything. A sacramental vision is things are not what you think they are. There's something else. There's something invisible. There's meaning. And that's a spiritual take, a spiritual vision. I experience faith, therefore, as life-giving and nourishing. I don't have to belong to a church building to understand this. Wherever you meet people, there's that opportunity for transcendence and sharing that by openness to the other. What I'm suggesting is that our lives are stories about becoming human. This is our fundamental project. That's what humans are about. To know that we are creatures of God. We are creatures. And that's an emphasis I make with students. They did not cause themselves to be. They're not responsible for their being. They're not sufficient unto themselves. We are creatures. You don't like that word, being creatures, right? Because they think it's from the dark lagoon or something. But creaturehood is our fundamental connection to God. Our very being is a function of being a creature. And that is to me, a very profound understanding of who we are and where we're going and what faith might involve. The recognition that we owe the gift of our very being, the gift of life, to God. To know we are creatures changes everything. It makes us know that we're possible becoming more human, that we are not finished. This realization means accepting what I'm calling the incarnational reality, which is in Christ, who shows us how to become authentic humans. First, we must accept creaturely humanity, given as a gift and entrusted to us. The free acceptance of this precedes any decisions we make or any actions we do. Knowing who we are allows us to knowing what we can become. Most of us are confused on this point. We are plagued by self-deception. We think we're something other than we are. We're thinking control of our lives. We're not. And when we do, we're making decisions that may not always be free. We're very much determined by our culture. We all want to be a Kardashian rather than a creature of God. We don't realize what openness means, that we don't have to be a product of our culture, our society. Because we have another look at life. We have another vision. We have a revelation that gives life and guidance to our life. We see Jesus to be the human face of God. And it is that makes me a Christian. It's the Christ embodiment, the incarnation of God in Jesus, that allows me to understand what incarnational spirituality might be, and to open us to those possibilities of living a different life, indeed a new life. Now, some of you know that I'm very fond of the Confessions of St. Augustine. We read it, and we delight in it. Now, this is the first autobiography in the Western world. It is the exemplar. Anybody who writes an autobiography studies Augustine. It's just absolutely brilliant. 4th century book, beautiful, and he's making his confession. But what is he confessing? Do you know? What is he confessing? Anybody? Anthony?
Confessing his flight from God.
Well, no, he isn't. He's confessing his love of God, his praise of God.
And his flight from that love.
Well, he's aware of that, but he's thanking God for getting out of that. But it's a praise of God for God's activity in his life, the transforming influence of God in his life. It begins with the first paragraph. We praise you. The word praise appears 10 times in the first paragraph. And of course, in Catholic lingo, confessions has something to do with confessing sins, but here he's not doing that, although the whole book has a lot of interesting sins in it, and I suggest you check them out, because they are impediments to his spiritual journey. But once he writes it after he has discovered Christ, and that's why he's giving praise and thanksgiving and gratitude. Simply says, he said, you have made us for yourself. Now this is a prayer. You have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. The restless heart is tying up what I call the dynamic of searching for others, trying to find meaning to life, encountering others, and discovering a mystery. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you. This is a dynamic which runs through all of Christianity, and it is probably the impetus behind most spiritual writings. In biblical language, heart cardia is the seat of our deepest desires and longing. So when we talk about the heart, we're talking about what is the core of humanity. And you see this in the scripture language. Heart, it doesn't mean something in the body. It means who you are. Who is your true identity? It's a primal desire, a wanting for peace and fulfillment. In the Christian context, we focus on following Christ, and we learn to be Christian disciples by acquiring a Christian character. We acquire virtues such as kindness, justice, hospitality, gentleness, humanity, humility, compassion. We aim to be formed by Christian virtues, but to live lives of mercy and love. So our Christian tradition provides models and examples by which we could shape our discipleship as we are seeking to be resting in God. I'm reminded of one of the Proverbs, Proverb 4. Above all else, guard your heart. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Be aware of your heart, your composition, your true identity, your stuff, and be conscious of that. These confessions of praise just acknowledge that the very fact of being is a gift from God. What does God give us? Existence, life, a fundamental relationship to God. And what Augustine is saying, you have to know who you are in relationship to God. If you don't know that your existence comes from God, you might think you're in charge of your life. You might think that it's in your hands. But what comes with creaturehoodness is humility. It's what the Beatitudes call being poor in spirit. People think being poor in spirit has to do with not having money or something like that. It's a spiritual. No, I mean, being poor in spirit means you know who you are. You don't have the arrogance of thinking it's your life and you're in charge of it. Poverty of spirit is a recognition that I am a creature dependent upon a creator. And once you do that, you know how to live. You don't try to make yourself godly. You don't try to supplant God with your own will. But you are shaped and formed by what you know about God, and it leads you to a fulfilled life. There's a saying in Augustine, we're not sure if Augustine said it, but it's attributed to him. And I'll tell you it in Latin. Amo, volo ut sis. Amo, volo ut sis. And this is a way of understanding who we are. I love you, I want you to be. And Augustine is saying that's how God created us. I love you, I want you to be. I want you to become. I want you to be fulfilled. I want you to reach your highest potential. I want you to be with us. If you said, summarize Christianity, the best summary I have is, we come from God and we go to God. I don't know what else we could say. From God to God. Amo, volo, ut sis. Now if God says that to us, imagine if we said that to others. I love you. I want you to be. I accept you. I affirm you. I take you to be lovable. That's amazing. We don't do that. We say, I love you if. I love you only if you do this. I love you only if you change. But the message that Augustine is giving us is that the basis of love is total acceptance and desire for the good of the other. Love is all about wishing good for the other. Not for yourself, but for the other. So if you love a person, you are wishing good for them. You only want good for them. And so this is different from a romantic notion of love. This is a creaturely notion of love. Amo, volo, ut sis. I love, I want you to be. To be. What a powerful thing to say to someone. I want you to be. I want you as you are. And together we will grow. And we'll have a future. So the confessions are really an adventure of the heart's hunger. Now we have many evasions. Most of us are very skilled at self-deception. We think we are in charge of our lives. Somehow we think we are responsible for our lives. Or you might say your parents are, or something like that. And of course, in a secondary sense, that's all true. But ultimately, our very existence was willed by God out of love. And so, if that's true for us, the creature creator, maybe human relationships can mimic that. When you love someone, you want them to be. You want them to thrive. You want them to reach their destiny. We don't want to use them. We want to revere them. We want to understand their sacred nature. And so we commit to one another with this in mind. I love you. I want you to be. It's a very simple statement. It's utterly profound. Now, what Augustine tells us in his story, and I think we feel in our lives, that we're not at home in this world. We have competing alternatives. We have desires, but it may not be desire for God. We have restlessness, and we're not sure what to do with it. And there are alternatives. We could meet other needs. We could have a life of health, beauty, pleasure, wealth, status, power. Those are desires. My friend Kim Kardashian and I were talking the other day, and she was interviewed, and they said, "Kim, what is your talent?" And she said, "Well, I didn't go to college, heaven forbid." And she said, "I have no talent. I'm a celebrity." Yeah. And she said, "I have wealth, beauty, and fans, and you all know her." It's a remarkable, How many would desire that future? It would be interesting. I don't really want to pick on her, except I say that this is a model the culture gives as this is desirable. This is worthy of our imitation. But what it forgets is there's more to it than that. There is a spiritual foundation. There is this relationship with the Creator. And of course, as we know, if you read the book of Genesis, we learn we are created. But then if you read chapter 3, there's this interesting thing called the fall. The fall of the first man and woman. And what that is a recognition that they don't want to be creatures. That's exactly what they call, the Bible doesn't call this. Augustine actually invented the concept of original sin. He said, what we see here is they have a command not to eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And what that means, it's an interesting fruit. I don't think our campus has this tree, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, what that means is they do not want God to determine what's good and evil. What the sin is that they want to decide what's good and evil. Does this sound familiar? Look in the mirror. Do you repeat this every day and twice nightly? You want to be God. Creatures do not want to be creatures. So the whole story is about the rejection of creaturely existence. And that changes everything. Some say it's pride, and some say it's disobedience. And
I want to know, how does all this affect your personal life?
Well, it makes me know who I am, that I have this...
Who are you?
A creature. I'm serious about that. That once I get that right, then I could go on to live a life of justice and compassion and love. But if I'm still confused, if I think I'm in charge of my life, I don't make room for God. My faith is maybe packaged. Maybe I got it in 3rd grade or something. But I'm talking about the adventure of being faithful, learning the faith to connect with God, is only through this connecting with other people, recognizing that it's a relationship. We all share creatureliness, and what binds us together is letting others thrive in love. Does that make sense?
I'm curious if the audience has a question.
I hope they do. What's your question? You sat there. That was a big mistake. Is this making sense to you or not? Yeah. Is this being too academic? That's part. You go to school and this is how you talk. Yeah.
How do you know when you become a human being?
That's a good question.
Could you repeat the question?
He wants to know, how will you know when you become a human being? Because you're becoming one. And I think once you recognize that you're dependent upon your Maker, and so this is why I'm stressing on that creature thing. That's a big deal. That's the foundation. And then you can live the life that God has put forward to us, particularly in the life of Jesus. I'm using Christian examples here. So once you know you're dependent upon God and you're aiming towards God, then you want to say, how do I walk that path? And you could say the highest teaching there is the Beatitudes from the book of Matthew. And they become the key to the Christian life, to become what you are to be. And because it says, blessed are those, you will be blessed. Blessed means happy. So the goal of Christianity is happiness. Beatitude is happiness. And what Christians are called to do is to form a beatitude community where we build up each other and follow the path. Early Christians did not, in fact, they didn't call themselves Christians at all because that word wasn't there. The word Christian is not found in the Scriptures, It first emerged in Antioch in Syria. Once people recognized that the first followers of Christ, who were Jews for Jesus, were no longer welcome in the synagogue and they're being kicked out. So now they are called Christian, not by themselves, but probably by their opponents. And so it's understanding that relationship with God that allows us to develop these fulfilling relationships with others, particularly characterized by forgiveness, love, mercy, compassion, justice, gentleness, hospitality. That becomes a possibility. What I'm saying is knowing who you are allows you to fulfill your possibilities. Otherwise, we're going to be distracted by alternative false options, which we call the possibilities in the world. Our society is always competing with God. And it has a leg up because it has very immediate payoffs. Success, beauty, money, wealth. But the point of being a creature is you're not a creature forever. You will die. And our society acts as if death is not a threat. And so when I meet people who are dying, or when I visit people who are suffering from HIV, or visit after a hurricane down in the Bahamas, this suffering clarifies who you are. And so part of getting to know who you are, two things have to happen. You have to experience suffering, you have to experience love. And then you might be on the path. What do you think? How will you know when you are becoming?
From what you said is happiness.
Yeah, happiness. What is happiness?
When you're happy with yourself, with what you're doing, your self-fulfillment.
Well, happiness generally means fulfilling your ultimate destiny, your goal. And we have short-term goals, right? You want to graduate, you want to get a job, you want to buy a car. Those aren't ultimate.
I think happiness is like a family.
Yeah, family and a long life, right? Long life.
Healthy.
But statistically, some of us will be dead next year. You know, some of you will not get your Medicare. You know, and so since this is a threat, we're threatened by death and destruction. How should you live? And therefore, the answer is, what you want out of life is not maybe in this world. Now, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't be successful and have a family and what things you're mentioning, but if you think that is the fulfillment, I think you're missing the faith vision of life.
Dr. Gower, if you had to leave them with one thought that you want them to really think about, what would that one thought be?
Gaze into the eyes of another. In other words, connect. I'll give you a technique. How do you enter into another person's life? There's a method called the method of passing over and coming back. So this is a technique, a technology even. How do you enter into another person's life? Well, you have to get in their shoes, as it were, intellectually and emotionally, what it means to see the world from another person's point of view. And you have to have an openness to enter into their lives. Then you come back to your own life and you are changed. So you enter a standpoint, and then your standpoint changes, and now you have the beginning of a relationship. And so what I was talking about, looking into the eyes of, is precisely this: passing over and coming back. It seems very simple, and it is, but it takes skill to do that. So what I'm saying is, learn to encounter the other, to embrace the other, to affirm the other, to live with the other. Recently, you've heard of Pope Francis? And some of you have heard. You met him? No. And what he's talking about these days was mercy, but then he has a technique he's been preaching about. It's called accompaniment. Accompaniment, and by that he means being with. You know, my tradition, trained by the Jesuits, was that we should be people for others, which is very powerful, and I accept that. But what I'm saying is, my take on mercy is, and this is the possibilities of mercy, we should be people with others. With others. And this accompaniment idea, I think, of the Pope is reinforcing that. And when I say looking into the others and going over and coming back, that's a being with. That, I think, is a path of mercy. It's different from service. It's different from justice. How do you share the lives? Because we're so egocentric. We want to just have our own lives. And we want to be successful at that. But this is building community. This is building relationships. This is how you do it. Be with. Live with. Another name for that might be compassion. How do you practice compassion? Anybody have compassion? No? I was afraid of that. What I'm thinking it means is be welcoming to others. Openness, hospitality, refrain from judgments. Be trusting. Bury your fears and accept your vulnerability. Be affirming. Acknowledge the goodness of the other. Be merciful in very concrete ways and celebrate the gift of another. So my point here is that the possibilities of faith are tied up with encountering others, living with them, walking with them is the idea of the accompaniment, sharing your life, celebrating their lives, and that will change the world. That'll form a new community. That, I think, is what faith calls us to do. It's not the traditional understanding. Faith here I see as being trust. Faith is a new understanding of who you are. It's a self-understanding.
One is what is faith, and two is how to get that relationship with God.
Yeah, faith is trust. And we get it, I'm saying, by understanding who we are as a creature in relationship to God. So that relationship, that fundamental basic relationship creature-creator is the basis for that. Then we can see other persons as creatures, and now we can relate to each other. Human creatures. And then, from the Christian point of view, we now have this model of Christ. And we have the virtues of living a Christian life. We have the Beatitudes. In our case here, on our campus, I think we should be stressing, and Evelyn put these signs up, the works of mercy. You know? We do have the mercy core values, but I think they're kind of abstract. The works of mercy said, do this, do that. Care for the poor, care for the dying, care for the sick, visit those in prison, give clothes to the naked, hunger. And that leads you to entering into the life of those people in need, sharing their lives, having that affect you, opening your heart, living a life of faith is trusting in God. What do you think it is, Sylvie? No? You have faith?
I
You?
believe you.
Yeah, well, let's hear it.
I am a believer. I believe that.
Yeah, see, now some people think faith is accepting beliefs. I'm going beyond that. Faith is a way of living based upon an understanding of who you are. And beliefs are okay, but that's not the heart of faith. Faith is commitment and trust and practice. There are many ways of thinking about faith, and the way you mentioned are there. I think once you have this sense of who you are, then you're capable of love. I go in with the quote from Kierkegaard. You know Kierkegaard, the great Danish philosopher? He said, when one has once fully entered into the realm of love, the world, no matter how imperfect it is, becomes rich and beautiful. It consists solely of opportunities for love. So my point here is that the faith provides opportunities for love. Faith provides opportunities for love. That changes who we are, changes who our community is, and affirms our commitment to a life of faith. So that's how I look at it. And now you say, what do I mean? How's that my life? It is my life. Because I have to think about how I'm living the life of faith, the journey. And the journey requires that I know who I am, that I have an understanding of my relationship to God. I said I do not have St. Paul falling off a horse experience. My experience comes from interacting with others and accepting them, listening to them, working with them, sharing their pain, sharing their suffering, affirming them, helping them, and this interaction between both of us. There, I think, is where I find God. So is it an activist statement? Maybe. I think it is because it doesn't mean I'm changing the world. When you are relating to one another, you're accepting, you're entering in what their feelings are, how they look at the world, what their needs are. Isn't that where you are living, in interrelationship with others? I mean, are you changing society now? Probably not. But it's in being with others, looking into the eyes of another. There, I think you'll find God. Not in books, not in churches, but in living the life of community, being with, companionship, or as the Pope is not using this word, accompaniment. Just being with people in this very profound way. It's not like hanging around with people only. It means you're sharing their lives. We are celebrating each other. We are helping one another. We're caring for one another, with the possibility that we might love one another. And that would be remarkable. I'm going to stop. Let's hear more questions. Attack what I just said.
I
Please.
have no question. I agree with you. And I think the whole concept of being present with another is a very good way to describe it, and something that is so very necessary to encourage our students to do in an age of technology, where so much time is spent not being with people that you're with. So it's a very important lesson that I hope that we carry on. I couldn't agree with you more. You said it beautifully.
Well,
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying. You know, we are now in technology is keeping us. The FaceTime is keeping us away from real people.
And that eye contact.
Yeah.
And truly meeting a person where they are and being present for them and being with them, being a present for them, I
Yeah.
guess. And then for you, where you're not sort of walled off or being judgmental or trying to be superior or stuck in an ego, but you're truly where they are. And I hadn't thought about it that way, but it's so important. And I guess my question would be, if I had one, is how do we teach that? How do we encourage each other to do that so it becomes a habit?
Well, we correct ourselves. Like you're saying, that why are we so much screen time? I was telling students today that now this is a serious prediction that students are going to marry the screens. You'll never date anyone. You'll just have a relationship online, and the most likelihood, they're saying, about 20 years, you will marry a robot. I went to a conference on this because that we're becoming cyber humans. You know, we have heart transplants, we have hip transplants, lung, kidney. This is eyes. You know, and are you still human? Well, yeah. But what I'm saying is technology is transforming what our body is like.
But it doesn't take away the soul, right, from a human being. I don't think a technology and artificial intelligence, and here's
That's
the
good
great
one,
debate,
yeah.
will have a soul. So it comes back to what is that soul? And while you might look into the eyes of a robot that looks very human-like and artificial intelligent and can interact with you, they don't understand the arc of a human life. So I don't know that it can be truly possible.
No, you're making good observations, but you can see the threat we're having now, an artificial person. And I mean, right now 20% of marriages come from online dating, which I'm not against, but it's so we're moving in ways that are going to take us away from looking into another person's eyes. Please.
Well, I was just thinking, because I just came from a class where we've had some really great discussions and debate and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I had previously just withdrawn from another class that was online because, you know, you're doing all this reading and then you're writing on a discussion board and you're reading everybody else's discussion board, and it's just like picking up another book. And you're not, like you were saying, you're not seeing the body language or the eye contact or anything like that. And even when I walk around here on campus sometimes, it's almost like somebody will walk past me and I'll say hello to them. And they're like surprised.
Oh, really?
Because
Yeah.
they're down there, they're in the phone or whatever.
Yeah,
And it's like,
that's a new threat to our being. Now, I'm not against technology, but I'm saying it can change our relationships in a way that might not be always positive. And what you're saying about, you're missing the community model. You know, you and your screen may not be satisfactory. In class, look, we're going to have online learning, and I think that's good. But I think what we're trading away is a sense of the face-to-face community building.